Hello, and welcome to Conversation with Friends. I'm Bill Staten, and my good buddy Brando Reyna is here with me today to hopefully to share a little bit of wisdom with you. We're going to be providing our thoughts for the markets and what's going on in the economy. Today is October the 25th. Navari Capital Management is a registered investment advisory firm headquartered in Charlotte. We create customized portfolios for individuals, families, and nonprofit organizations. We emphasize individual stocks and bonds. We also provide retirement planning and estate plan review services. The information provided here is for general information purposes only, and all expressions of opinion here are subject to change without notice in reaction to changing market conditions. Well, Brando, we're alive and well again today, and here we are.
Good to see you.
Good to see you. All right, so we're starting out. I hope you can see the Tesla being charged with a gasoline-powered start. I just love that.
You gotta think, like, did the guy know he was gonna be going so far, so he planned it and he put it in his trunk?
Might have done it to make a humorous photo.
Oh yeah, that could have been it too. Or like when I saw it, I was wondering too, is like, or did somebody see like, oh, this guy stalled in the middle of nowhere, went home, got a generator, and came back and gave him just enough juice to get to.
So
somewhere.
you're saying it could be a plant?
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe.
Well, Brando and I always like to start off with something humorous, so I wanted to give you two of the quotes I love best from Milton Friedman. He was University of Chicago Nobel Prize winning economist. I love these two. If you put the federal government in charge of the Sahara Desert, in 5 years there would be a shortage of sand. And the other one I love, Brando, nothing is so permanent as a temporary government program. So now that we started with something a little bit lighthearted, we can get into something maybe a little bit more serious.
Yeah. This chart that Bill and I wanted to put up has to deal with looking at historical returns and kind of the subsequent market performance after you get a certain drawdown. It's really interesting because what you'll see on the screen is like when the S&P enters a bear market, which in this case is being defined as 20% drawdown, more than not, the forward 12-month returns are pretty positive, right? There were lots of ways that this data could have gotten broken out, but the 1-year return is up 22%, the 3-year return is up 51%, and the 5-year return is up even more than that. And I think it just goes to show to the staying power of being focused on the future of what's to come and not looking in the rearview mirror of what's just happened and making an emotional decision, but looking at fundamentals and again looking at the future, what's to come and how that relates to returns.
Yeah, Brando and I were talking about this shortly before we came on right now, and the fact is that overall we believe that U.S. corporations in particular are in much better financial shape than normally they would be in case we go into recession, number one. Number two, pessimism by several measures among investors is about as bad as it's ever been, or strong as it's ever been if you wish to measure it that way, which conversely is very, very positive for stocks going forward. And as we were also talking about, Brando, earlier, we now have a record number of U.S. companies that qualify to be among the elite universe called America's Finest Companies, and we also have a record number on the sidelines hoping to qualify some years down the road. So I think that's a real positive as we sally forth down the road.
Yeah, you brought up something that I think is worth reiterating. The companies are in good financial strength. I think there's been overall,
yes.
There's been some, I think, relationships of what we're experiencing now versus what we went through in 2008, 2009. And I just want to say, what we're experiencing now is quite a bit different. The banking system now has been beefed up. It's quite a bit stronger. The issues aren't stemming specifically from the banking sector. It's dealing with interest rates, but it's those institutions are quite a bit sturdier than what they were, 12 years ago.
That's a very, very good point. And again, the corporations are in much better shape overall financially than they were some years ago. So there are a lot of positives on the horizon. But the fact, again, that investors overall are so negative by a number of surveys, again, conversely, is a positive. And we think that presents a lot of opportunities for investors who are willing to commit to well-chosen stocks and also well-chosen bonds.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this kind of goes into our next slide that we had planned. And Bill, you and I look back, you and I actually started talking about this concept in the beginning part of September. But we wanted to put a chart, and we both came up with these ideas independently. Given the environment we're in, what are some of the things that are going to stay the same? And I think you originally came up with this idea based off of a Jeff Bezos interview, didn't you?
Yes.
Wasn't there like an analyst?
Bezos, the founder and the CEO at Amazon, said in an interview last year, he said people are always asking him, well, what things is Amazon going to do differently going down the road? He says, but I never get asked the question, what things are we doing well that are going to stay the same?
Mm-hmm.
And he said, it looks like to me that would be an obvious question.
Yeah.
Well, so Brando and I started talking about the concept in terms of, well, what things are we going to stick to, or what are the traits among America's finest companies that will always be true? So, Brando, Brando put this slide together.
Yeah. So Bill and I came up with these points kind of independently. I'll go over the three that I kind of came up with. One, I think investor emotion, right? And again, looking at this from a long-term perspective or a long investing horizon, investor emotion is always going to be a critical part of the game, right? You're going to have people get euphoria, and they get the highs are going to be high, and people are going to feel great, and the lows are going to feel low, and they're going to be in the dumps. So
right.
There's going to be that continued cyclical movement of investor emotion. Another thing I thought was an improved standard of living, and when we think about what was life like 200, 300 years ago? How does that compare to what life was like 100 years ago or 50 years ago? I think there's always this propensity for us to do better, right? Healthcare is going to get better. We're going to come up with better medicines. Technology is going to make our lives more efficient. People being more educated. There's just those general long-term themes that we want to keep in mind as we go through. And I think that's one in particular. When emotion gets really negative, I think it's easy to lose sight that, everybody's still out there trying to make things better, and there's going to be a way that, we continue to progress in the years that come down the road.
That's a good point, yeah.
The last point I wanted to make is that policy is a pendulum. And what I would say, with the midterm elections coming up, it doesn't matter if you're on the left or the right, for whatever reason, policy has become very polarizing. If you're on one side and the other of the aisle, and other side of the aisle gets control, it's things are so negative, and how can we ever do this? And if it always goes the other way, the thing to keep in mind is government policy, and we've seen this. Bill, you've probably seen it more than most, but it always swings, and it probably swings a little too far, and then it comes back. And then when it comes back, it swings a little bit too far on that side as well. But overall, companies that are well managed and well run are going to find a way to navigate those waters, and they don't just stand back on their heels. They find a way to succeed.
Yeah, and they're flexible. And you use the word navigate, and that's a really good word. And there are three other things on here too. First of all, in terms of managing portfolios, we are always diversifying. You don't have a portfolio filled with stocks from just one industry. So the diversity, it's a principle in nature. You just look at how many hundreds of thousands of species there are of insects and animals and trees and plants and so forth. So diversity is a universal principle. Second of all, we do have, we're always, to be one of America's finest companies, the company has to pay a higher cash dividend a minimum 10 years in a row. If it flattens the dividend, or even worse, cuts it, number one, it will no longer be one of America's finest companies, and number two, it will no longer be in your portfolio. you can count on those two things. So it will automatically be kicked out. And number three, we always think about safety. We always think about when we add something in your portfolio, and also once it's in your portfolio, what might go wrong. And we're always looking at that. We're always thinking about that. So just because we don't do anything in your portfolio doesn't mean that we're not thinking about it.
Yeah.
We take being cautious and preserving your capital very, very seriously.
Yeah, good points. Really good points.
And let me also point out a couple of things. Today there is so much media on almost any subject you care to name, well beyond the stock market and the economy. And there are always people out there telling you all the things that are going to go wrong. Let me give you three examples. So Paul Krugman is a Nobel Prize winning economist. And in 1998, he made the world famous prediction, quote, "The growth of the internet will slow drastically." Well, that was on the money. Irving Fisher was the famous economist who predicted a stock market boom right before the crash of 1929. Probably none of you remembers this man. His name was Ravi Batra. In 1987, he wrote the best-selling book, The Great Depression of 1990. And I debated him on a radio show in 1988, 1 year later. One lady asked me a question. She wanted to know if her treasury bonds were safe. All the other questions went to him. Well, he was obviously way, way off base. And in 1968, about 19 years ahead of that book, Paul Ehrlich wrote the best-selling book, The Population Bomb, and he predicted mass starvation in the coming years, which of course we have not had. So it's easy to write all these horrendous books about the end of the world and how everything is going to go bad on all kinds of subjects, but you really have to dig into it to make sure, are they really based on fact, or are they just written by somebody who wants to make a buck?
Mm-hmm.
And we really do our darndest to separate fact from fiction.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great
I
point.
wanted to bring that up.
It's interesting. I've seen a couple lists where you pull out these headlines from Newsweek, and it's like 1970 or 1980, 90, and you could almost plop them into today's time frame.
Yeah, or maybe just change a word or two, and it fits.
Yeah.
Another scare end of the world scenario.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely.
On to microchip.
Microchip, yeah. So we wanted to cover one of the companies that we're working on trying to get into certain people's portfolios where it makes sense, and this is Microchip Technologies. As of lately, semiconductors have gotten just beaten up left and right. It's based on kind of two different concepts. One is semiconductors are cyclical in nature. The economy is being forecasted to go into a recession. There's going to be less demand for chips and that technology. The second is there's some continued posturing between the US and China in terms of supply chains, again, for semiconductor chips. It's a little uncertain how that plays out. Coming back to kind of some of our long-lasting tenets that we look at when we're looking at investing, one of the things we've mentioned earlier was we're going to find a way to succeed and prosper and do well. Part of us doing well long term is incorporating technology. And we've seen that over the last 20, 30, 50 years, you could argue. Chips are going to continue to be a part of our everyday.
They have to be.
Yeah, the everyday workings of our life. Microchip technology is in part of this. They're not quite a competitor to like an Intel or NVIDIA or some of those graphic units, but they do a good job of the chips that they're producing. One of the other big things that caught our eye and our attention was the last 5-10 years they've really been focused on mergers and acquisitions. That stance has changed relatively recent. I think it was over the summer they really started coming out saying, we have our portfolio, the companies saying they have their portfolio pretty much set where they want it, and they're really going to focus on increasing the dividend on a go-forward basis. we hope that that's the case and they continue to do that. You know, we can't ever guarantee anything, but if that is the case, I think given the interest rate environment we're in, a company that's going to be able to really increase the dividend in a good capacity is going to be able to withstand some higher interest rates.
Yeah, that's a good point. And want to keep this short and sweet and on the money for you. Wanted to bring up one important point between now and the end of the year. Any of us here at Navarre who are working with you on your portfolios, we are happy to meet with you and your tax advisor, Zoom call or in person if you're local. So please keep that in mind, and if it's useful to you, we certainly are happy to do that. I also wanted to share something with you. During my lifetime, which is, I'm the oldest person here at Navarre, we don't want to go into my advanced age, but during my lifetime, the third year of a presidential cycle, and we're now in the third year of a presidential cycle. And I want you to be sure to listen to this. In the period from November the 1st, which we're starting next Tuesday, the period from November the 1st to April 30th the following year, in the third year of a presidential cycle, every one of the third years since I was born in 1947, every single one of those 6-year periods has been up.
That's 6-year periods or 6 months?
6 month periods.
6 month periods.
6 month periods. That's 18 in a row, a perfect record. And on average, listen to this, and on average, the return has been 18%. And next week we are getting ready to start the 19th 6 month period. So we hope that batting average continues. And I always like to leave you with something positive to think about, and I wanted to share something with you from Helen Keller's Inspiring Life. I didn't realize it until recently, but I knew she was deaf and blind, but she wasn't born that way. She went deaf and blind at age 2.
Really?
Yeah, at age 2. And she was the first person deaf and blind to earn a college degree in the United States, and she graduated in 1904 at a time when not many women graduated in higher education. But she had a couple of quotes I thought that I'd like to share with you. She said, "I would rather walk with a friend in the dark than alone in the light." But this is particularly important, particularly since, Brando, you and I are in the securities business, the so-called securities business. She said, "Security is mostly a superstition. It does not exist in nature, nor do the children of men as a whole experience it. Avoiding danger is no safer in the long run than outright exposure. Life is either a daring adventure or nothing."
Huh.
And that's from a blind and deaf woman.
Yeah.
Life is either a daring adventure or nothing.
Well, it's definitely a daring adventure working with you.
Thanks, Brando, for that building me up as you always do. And with that, we'll close, and we thank you for being with us. As always, we're open to questions listen, we always like ideas for how we can serve you better. So please email us or call us, and we'd love to hear how we can do things better to help you. Thanks so much for being with us, and thank you, and God bless.